From the outside looking in, it seems simple. On the inside, it's different.
We had a Crime Stopper tip come in on this address.
Shit. It's 1.4 minutes. That's a $20 million rip. You gotta be smart right now. You gotta move this money, man.
Stay off the radios, no call-outs.
What would you do with this? Just this. Everything.
Yeah, cops playing robbers.
Need any help tonight, Lieutenant?
Nope. We didn't get a heads up about this. The longer we stay here, the dice who we talk to matters. You see that? P-I-G-S. Is there anything that you've heard about him?
He's in every division.
Watch your back. Cover! Bitch! I'm breaking left! I got the roof! You want to steal this rip? Just say it out loud. You a snitch, Mike?
This is my crime scene. Let me run it.
They just gonna take the money?
Were you and Captain Velez close?
First off, back the fuck up.
You should just take whatever money you want and walk away. Before this goes really bad for all of us.
The moment the first trailer for The Rip appeared online, people immediately started talking about one thing: tension. Not explosions, not superheroes, not giant action scenes, just pure tension. The kind that slowly crawls under your skin. The kind of crime thriller that makes every conversation feel dangerous and every silence feel even more dangerous. That is exactly why this film quickly became one of the most discussed crime dramas of the year. It feels raw, serious, emotional, and grounded in a way modern thrillers sometimes forget to be. What makes the movie special is not only the action or mystery, it is the atmosphere. The film creates a world where trust disappears minute by minute. Every character feels like they are hiding something, every scene feels heavy. Even when nothing big is happening, the audience still feels nervous because the movie constantly gives the feeling that something terrible is coming. The story follows a group of people connected to crime, corruption, and hidden money. But beneath all the criminal drama, the movie is really about greed, survival, loyalty, and betrayal. It asks a simple but powerful question: how far will someone go when money changes their life overnight? One of the strongest things about the film is its realism. The characters do not feel like movie heroes. They feel tired, broken, emotional, selfish, scared, and human. Their mistakes create the tension, their secrets create the danger. That realism became one of the biggest reasons audiences connected with the movie so deeply. Long before filming started, the project was already attracting attention because of its dark concept and powerful cast. Hollywood has always loved crime thrillers, but this movie arrived at a time when audiences were starting to want smarter and more emotional stories again instead of only giant CGI spectacles. The filmmakers understood this perfectly. Instead of creating a loud action movie, they focused on character drama and psychological pressure. The development process reportedly took several years because the script went through many rewrites. The creators wanted the dialogue to feel natural and grounded. They wanted every character to have believable motivations. Early drafts apparently focused more on traditional crime action, but later versions became more emotional and psychological. That decision completely changed the tone of the movie and helped separate it from many other crime films released in recent years. One of the biggest talking points during development was the casting. Fans became excited because the movie brought together performers known for intensity and emotional acting. The cast chemistry became one of the strongest parts of the final product. Instead of actors trying to outshine each other, the performances blend together naturally, creating the feeling of a dangerous group slowly collapsing under pressure. The lead actor carries the emotional weight of the film brilliantly. His performance feels controlled and subtle. He does not need long speeches to show emotion. Most of the tension appears in his face, body language, and silence. Viewers can feel his fear and confusion even when he says nothing. That quiet acting style helped make the movie feel more realistic. Another standout performer brings a colder and more unpredictable energy to the story. Every scene involving this character feels unstable because the audience never knows what he will do next. This unpredictability became one of the movie's greatest strengths because it constantly keeps viewers uncomfortable. Supporting actors also deserve praise because no character feels wasted. Even smaller roles leave an impression. Some characters appear only briefly but still feel memorable because the writing gives everyone personality and emotional weight. The casting directors clearly focused on finding actors who could create believable chemistry instead of simply choosing the biggest names possible. That decision helped the film feel authentic. The conversations feel messy and natural instead of overly cinematic. People interrupt each other, they hesitate, they panic, they lie badly. All of this makes the world feel real. As production moved forward, the filmmakers decided to avoid making the movie visually glamorous. Instead of using bright colors or stylish action sequences, the cinematography focuses on shadows, darkness, rain, dirty streets, abandoned buildings, and quiet rooms filled with tension. This visual style became one of the defining features of the movie. The camera work is especially important because it often stays close to the characters. This creates a claustrophobic feeling, making the audience feel trapped with them. During arguments or dangerous moments, the camera barely moves away, forcing viewers to stay inside the emotional chaos. Filming reportedly took place across several gritty urban locations chosen specifically for realism. Instead of constructing massive sets, the production used practical locations whenever possible. This gave the movie a rough texture that audiences appreciated. The streets feel alive, the bars feel dirty, the apartments feel cramped, nothing looks fake or polished. Weather also became an accidental but powerful part of the film's visual identity. Many scenes feature rain, cloudy skies, and nighttime settings. These elements increase the feeling of dread throughout the movie. Even outdoor scenes feel emotionally heavy because the environment itself looks exhausted. The production team reportedly worked hard to make the world believable. Small details such as clothing, lighting, background noise, and props were carefully designed to avoid making the film feel overly cinematic. Characters wear practical clothing instead of flashy costumes. Cars look used and damaged, buildings feel old and neglected. All of these small choices combine to create immersion. The director deserves major credit for understanding restraint. Many modern thrillers rely on constant twists or non stop action. This film chooses patience instead. The director allows scenes to breathe. Conversations continue longer than expected. Silence becomes a weapon. Viewers are forced to pay attention to body language and hidden emotions. This slower pacing will not work for everyone, but fans of psychological crime thrillers appreciated it greatly. The film trusts the audience to stay engaged without needing constant explosions or action scenes every few minutes. Another major reason the movie works so well is the dialogue. Conversations feel sharp but realistic. Characters speak like real people instead of movie characters trying to sound cool. Some scenes become incredibly intense simply because of what remains unsaid. One particular interrogation style sequence became highly praised online because it demonstrates how tension can be created almost entirely through acting and silence. The scene reportedly took several days to shoot because the filmmakers wanted every reaction and pause to feel perfect. The music also plays a massive role in shaping the atmosphere. Instead of loud orchestral themes, the score uses dark ambient sounds, low electronic tones, and subtle percussion. Sometimes the music is barely noticeable, but that is exactly why it works so well. It quietly increases anxiety without distracting from the performances. In several scenes, the filmmakers remove music completely. This silence becomes terrifying because viewers hear only breathing, footsteps, distant traffic, or background noises. These choices make the movie feel more immersive and grounded. The soundtrack avoids trying to manipulate emotion too aggressively. Instead, it slowly builds dread underneath scenes. By the final act, the tension becomes almost unbearable because the music, cinematography, and performances all work together perfectly. When the first teaser released online, reactions exploded across social media. Many viewers immediately compared the tone to classic crime thrillers from earlier decades. Audiences praised the dark atmosphere and serious storytelling style. People were excited to see a crime film focused more on psychology than spectacle. The trailer itself became popular partly because it revealed very little about the plot. Instead of spoiling twists, it focused on mood and tension. This mystery increased audience curiosity dramatically. Online discussions quickly turned into theories about the story and characters. Fans analyzed tiny details from the trailer frame by frame. Some believed the movie would involve hidden betrayals inside a criminal organization. Others thought it would become a survival thriller. The secrecy around the story helped build hype naturally. Marketing for the film remained surprisingly restrained compared to many major releases. Instead of flooding audiences with footage, the studio relied heavily on atmosphere and mystery. This strategy worked because it made viewers even more curious. When the movie finally premiered, critics immediately praised the performances and direction. Many reviews described the film as intense, emotionally exhausting, and gripping. Some critics called it one of the strongest crime thrillers in years because of its grounded realism and patient storytelling. Not every reviewer loved the slower pacing, however. Some viewers expected a more action heavy experience and felt surprised by the film's focus on dialogue and character psychology. But even many critics who disliked the pacing still praised the acting and atmosphere. Audience reactions were particularly strong online. Social media became filled with discussions about shocking scenes, character decisions, and emotional moments. Fans especially loved debating the ending because it leaves enough ambiguity for multiple interpretations. The final act became one of the movie's most talked about aspects. Without revealing spoilers, the ending avoids simple Hollywood resolution. Instead, it focuses on consequences. Characters must live with their choices, and the emotional damage feels permanent. This grounded ending divided some viewers but also made the film more memorable. Many audiences appreciated that the movie respected the seriousness of its themes instead of forcing a happy conclusion. Memes also quickly became part of the movie's online popularity. Certain scenes featuring awkward silence, suspicious looks, or emotional breakdowns turned into reaction images across social media platforms. Fans joked about how stressful the movie feels from beginning to end. One scene involving a tense conversation in near total silence became especially popular online because viewers related it to uncomfortable real life situations. The internet transformed the moment into countless memes about anxiety, trust issues, and stressful friendships. Another meme trend focused on how every character in the film looks emotionally exhausted. Fans joked that nobody in the movie sleeps, smiles, or relaxes even once. These jokes actually helped the movie reach wider audiences because clips and screenshots spread rapidly online. Despite the memes, audiences still respected the film seriously. Unlike some movies that become memes because they are unintentionally funny, this film became meme material because viewers were deeply engaged with it emotionally. Box office performance became another interesting topic surrounding the movie. Crime thrillers are often considered risky compared to giant franchise films, but strong word of mouth helped the movie perform well. Many viewers recommended it to friends specifically because it felt different from typical blockbuster releases. The film benefited greatly from adult audiences looking for more mature storytelling. While superhero films and giant action movies still dominate theaters, many viewers appreciated seeing a grounded thriller focused on emotion and suspense. International audiences also responded strongly to the movie because themes like greed, betrayal, desperation, and corruption feel universal. The emotional conflicts work across cultures because the characters feel human and believable. One reason the film stayed in public conversation longer than expected is because it invites discussion. Viewers constantly debate character motivations and moral choices. Nobody in the story feels completely innocent, which makes audience opinions fascinatingly divided. Some viewers sympathize deeply with certain characters, while others strongly condemn them. This moral complexity gives the movie replay value because audiences notice new details during second viewings. Film analysts especially praise the screenplay structure. The movie slowly reveals information piece by piece instead of explaining everything immediately. This creates suspense while also rewarding careful viewers who pay attention to dialogue and visual clues. Cinematography analysis also became popular online. Many film lovers discuss the use of darkness, reflections, shadows, and framing throughout the movie. Several scenes visually trap characters inside windows, hallways, or narrow rooms, symbolizing their emotional entrapment. The use of lighting deserves particular praise. Faces are often partially hidden in shadow, visually representing secrecy and dishonesty. These artistic choices feel subtle but powerful. Another fascinating aspect of the film is how violence is handled. Instead of glamorous action choreography, violence appears sudden, ugly, and frightening. The movie does not celebrate brutality. Every violent moment feels emotionally damaging. This realistic treatment of violence made many scenes more impactful because audiences understood real consequences existed. Injuries hurt, fear feels real, characters panic instead of behaving like invincible action heroes. The editing style also contributes heavily to the movie's tension. Quick cuts are used sparingly, instead, scenes often remain uncomfortably long. The audience is forced to sit inside emotional moments without escape. This approach increases suspense because viewers cannot predict when situations will explode. Character relationships remain the emotional heart of the film. Beneath all the criminal tension lies a deeper story about trust breaking apart. Friendships collapse, partnerships become dangerous, loyalty disappears under pressure. This emotional realism is what separates the film from more generic thrillers. Audiences are not simply watching plot twists. They are watching people emotionally destroy each other through fear and greed. One especially praised relationship in the movie involves two characters whose friendship slowly transforms into paranoia and suspicion. Their emotional breakdown becomes heartbreaking because viewers understand they once genuinely trusted each other. The movie also explores how money changes people psychologically. Characters begin justifying terrible decisions because they convince themselves survival depends on it. This moral decay happens gradually, making it believable and disturbing. Fans online frequently discussed which character they trusted most during the film. Interestingly, different viewers gave completely different answers. This demonstrates how effectively the screenplay avoids simple morality. The movie's realism also comes from its emotional messiness. Characters make bad decisions under stress. They panic, they hesitate, they misunderstand situations. These flaws make them feel painfully human. Several critics compared the film's atmosphere to classic crime dramas from the 1970s and 1990s. The movie clearly respects older thriller traditions while still feeling modern in pacing and style. Another major topic among fans became the performances during emotionally silent scenes. Many actors today rely heavily on dialogue, but this film trusts facial expressions and body language. Some of the strongest moments contain almost no words at all. The director reportedly encouraged improvisation during certain conversations. This likely explains why many interactions feel spontaneous and natural instead of scripted. The movie's title itself became heavily analyzed online. Fans debated its symbolic meaning and how it connects to themes of greed, destruction, and emotional collapse. Some interpreted it literally while others viewed it metaphorically. Fashion in the movie also gained attention despite the film's grounded realism. The characters' clothing choices subtly reflect personality and emotional states. As paranoia increases, appearances become rougher and more exhausted looking. The film avoids romanticizing criminal life. Unlike some crime dramas that make danger look exciting, this movie focuses on fear, stress, and emotional deterioration. Crime feels dirty and psychologically damaging rather than glamorous. This mature perspective helped the movie resonate strongly with older audiences, especially. Many viewers appreciated seeing a thriller that treated its themes seriously. The release strategy also played an important role in the movie's success. Instead of trying to compete directly with giant family blockbusters, the film targeted adult audiences seeking darker and more emotional storytelling. Word of mouth became the movie's greatest marketing tool. People recommended it because of the emotional tension and shocking performances rather than massive visual spectacle. Online creators and film reviewers also helped increase popularity. Video essays analyzing symbolism, character psychology, and hidden details became extremely popular across social media platforms. Some fans even began creating theories about possible sequels or spin offs, though the film works strongly as a standalone story. Its ending leaves enough unanswered questions for imagination while still feeling emotionally complete. Another reason the movie stayed relevant online is because many viewers felt emotionally drained after watching it. Audiences often describe needing time to process the story afterward. That emotional impact created strong discussion. The movie proves that thrillers do not need giant budgets or non stop action to succeed. Strong performances, careful direction, realistic dialogue, and emotional tension can still captivate audiences deeply. For younger viewers discovering serious crime dramas for the first time, the film became an introduction to slower and more psychological storytelling styles. For older audiences, it felt like a reminder of classic thriller filmmaking. The emotional heaviness of the film may not appeal to everyone. It is not casual entertainment. The movie demands attention and patience. But viewers willing to engage with its atmosphere often find the experience unforgettable. The final scenes especially linger in the audience's mind because the movie refuses easy comfort. The emotional consequences remain visible even after the credits roll. That lingering discomfort is part of what makes the film powerful. Years from now, people will likely remember the movie less for specific plot twists and more for its feeling. The constant anxiety, the emotional exhaustion, the fear hiding inside every conversation. Very few thrillers manage to sustain that atmosphere so consistently. In the end, The Rip succeeds because it understands human weakness. Beneath all the crime and suspense lies a simple truth. People become dangerous when fear and greed begin controlling them. The film explores this idea with realism, patience, and emotional honesty. That is why the movie connected so strongly with audiences around the world. It feels human, messy, painful, uncomfortable. Real. As the movie continued dominating conversations online, another thing became very clear. Audiences were obsessed with the emotional pressure inside the story. Many thrillers focus only on mystery or action, but this film traps viewers inside the mental breakdown of its characters. That psychological tension became the real engine of the movie. One reason this emotional intensity works so well is because the screenplay understands how ordinary people slowly become desperate. The characters are not introduced as monsters. Most of them begin as flawed but understandable individuals. They make small compromises at first, then those compromises become larger. Eventually, the situation grows completely out of control. That gradual transformation is what makes the story feel frighteningly believable. Viewers can imagine real people making similar mistakes under pressure. The movie constantly asks the audience an uncomfortable question. If you were trapped in the same situation, would you really behave differently? The pacing of the film deserves even deeper appreciation because it carefully controls audience emotions. Early scenes feel tense but manageable. Characters still joke with each other. There are moments of calm, but little by little trust disappears. Every new revelation increases pressure. By the second half of the movie, even simple conversations feel dangerous. One of the most impressive directing choices is how paranoia spreads through the group almost like a disease. At first, suspicion targets one person, then another. Soon, nobody trusts anyone anymore. This emotional collapse becomes more terrifying than physical violence because viewers watch relationships disintegrate in real time. The filmmakers clearly understood that audiences fear betrayal more than explosions. Some of the movie's most stressful scenes involve characters simply staring at each other, trying to decide who is lying. The silence in those moments becomes unbearable. Another element that strengthened the film's impact was the sound design. Many viewers praised how carefully background noise was used throughout the story. Small sounds become emotionally important. Footsteps echo louder during tense scenes. Doors closing feel threatening. Distant sirens create constant unease. Even breathing becomes noticeable. This attention to detail makes the audience feel physically present inside the environment. Instead of watching events from a comfortable distance, viewers feel trapped inside the same emotional pressure as the characters. The editing during confrontation scenes also deserves praise. The film often cuts between close ups of nervous faces, trembling hands, shifting eyes, and subtle reactions. These visual details communicate fear without needing dialogue. The audience studies every expression carefully, trying to figure out who might betray the group next. One particularly memorable scene involves a quiet dinner conversation where almost nothing dramatic happens on the surface. Yet, audiences described it as one of the most stressful scenes in the entire film because of the emotional undercurrent. Nobody trusts each other anymore, and viewers can feel it in every glance and pause. This ability to create suspense without constant action demonstrates strong filmmaking confidence. The movie trusts atmosphere and performance more than spectacle. The performances themselves continued receiving praise months after release. Critics especially admired how restrained the acting feels. Nobody overacts, nobody delivers exaggerated dramatic speeches. Emotions remain controlled until they finally explode at crucial moments. That restraint makes emotional breakdowns much more powerful when they finally happen. Characters spend most of the movie trying to hide fear and panic. When those emotions eventually burst out, the impact feels devastating. Several actors reportedly spent significant time studying real criminal behavior and interrogation psychology before filming began. This preparation likely helped create the grounded realism audiences noticed immediately. One supporting actor in particular became a fan favorite because of how unpredictable his performance feels. Some viewers described him as the emotional time bomb of the story. Every scene involving this character creates anxiety because audience never know whether he will stay calm or suddenly lose control. The internet quickly filled with discussions ranking the performances. Fans debated which actor delivered the strongest work and opinions varied widely. That variety itself shows how strong the ensemble cast truly is. Different viewers connected emotionally with different characters. Another fascinating aspect of the film is how it portrays masculinity and emotional repression. Many characters struggle to express fear openly. Instead of communicating honestly, they become aggressive, defensive, or emotionally distant. This inability to trust and communicate becomes one of the main reasons everything falls apart. Some film analysts interpreted the movie as a study of toxic pride and ego. Characters constantly try to appear strong even when they are terrified. Their refusal to admit vulnerability creates even more destruction. The script also cleverly avoids simple exposition. Instead of explaining every detail directly to the audience, information emerges naturally through conversation and behavior. This approach rewards attentive viewers. Many fans admitted they noticed completely new details during second viewings because the screenplay quietly plants clues throughout earlier scenes. Certain lines of dialogue gain entirely different meanings once audiences understand the full story. The movie's color palette also became a major topic among cinematography fans. The film heavily uses dark blues, grays, black shadows, and faded lighting. Warm colors appear rarely, which visually reinforces the emotional coldness spreading through the story. Some viewers notice that lighting changes subtly as characters lose trust in each other. Early scenes contain slightly softer tones, while later sequences become harsher and darker. These visual choices work subconsciously on the audience. Rain imagery appears repeatedly throughout the movie as well. Storms often arrive during emotionally important moments. This weather symbolism may sound simple, but the filmmakers use it effectively to increase atmosphere. The city itself almost feels like another character in the film. Empty streets, flickering lights, old buildings, and abandoned locations create a world that feels emotionally exhausted. The environment mirrors the mental state of the characters. Fans online frequently praised how lived in the world feels. Nothing appears artificial or overly polished. The realism makes the tension more believable because the story feels grounded in recognizable human environments. Another reason the movie gains strong respect is because it avoids turning criminals into glamorous anti heroes. The characters are complicated, sometimes sympathetic, but never romanticized. Their choices create fear, destruction, and emotional damage. This mature approach separates the movie from many modern crime stories that celebrate violence too heavily. Here, violence feels tragic and ugly rather than exciting. One shocking moment late in the film reportedly left audiences silent in theaters. According to many viewers, the scene succeeds not because of graphic imagery but because of emotional consequences. The audience understands exactly how badly the situation has spiraled by that point. The movie's final act especially stands out because of how emotionally relentless it becomes. By the climax, viewers realize there are no clean solutions left. Every decision carries terrible consequences. This sense of inevitability gives the story tragic power. Characters keep hoping they can still escape disaster, but audiences slowly understand the damage may already be irreversible. The ending sparked massive debate online because different viewers interpreted character motivations differently. Some believed certain actions were justified under extreme pressure. Others argued those same decisions proved moral corruption. These debates helped keep the film alive in public conversation long after release. Movies that invite interpretation often develop stronger long term fan communities because audiences enjoy discussing them repeatedly. Another major reason audiences connected with the film is because it reflects real modern anxieties. Beneath the crime story lies a deeper fear about survival, money, desperation, and mistrust. Many viewers recognized aspects of real world stress inside the character's behavior. The movie understands how financial pressure can destroy morality. Characters become trapped not only physically but psychologically. Once greed enters the situation, nobody can think clearly anymore. This theme resonated strongly with audiences living through uncertain economic times. The film feels less like fantasy and more like an exaggerated version of real human desperation. Social media played a massive role in expanding the movie's popularity. Clips featuring intense dialogue exchanges spread rapidly across platforms. Viewers especially loved posting scenes where characters stare at each other suspiciously without speaking. Reaction memes exploded online because the movie contains so many emotionally awkward moments. Fans use screenshots to joke about stressful friendships, workplace tension, family arguments, and trust issues. One image featuring a character looking completely exhausted became especially viral. People used it to describe everything from school stress to difficult jobs to relationship drama. The movie accidentally created some of the internet's most relatable reaction images of the year. The soundtrack also developed its own fan following. Listeners appreciated how atmospheric and minimal the music feels. Instead of dominating scenes, the score quietly amplifies dread underneath conversation. Some tracks became popular in online edits and fan videos because of their haunting mood. The music perfectly captures the feeling of emotional collapse and paranoia. Another fascinating element of the movie is its use of confined spaces. Many scenes occur inside cramped rooms, narrow hallways, cars, or small apartments. This physical closeness increases tension because characters cannot emotionally escape each other. The camera often frames people behind glass, bars, doorways, or shadows. These visual choices subtly reinforce themes of entrapment and isolation. Film students and critics began analyzing the movie heavily because it demonstrates how visual storytelling can strengthen psychological themes without needing obvious exposition. The screenplay also carefully balances ambiguity. Enough information is provided for viewers to understand the story, but certain details remain intentionally unclear. This uncertainty mirrors the character's paranoia. Nobody fully understands the entire situation, and that confusion creates realism. Real life rarely provides perfect answers or complete clarity. One especially praised aspect of the writing is how consequences continue affecting later scenes emotionally. The movie never forgets what happened earlier. Characters carry trauma visibly throughout the story. Small emotional reactions become important. A nervous glance, hesitation before speaking, or trembling hand can reveal enormous psychological damage. The actors communicate fear physically rather than verbally. The movie's influence on internet culture also became surprisingly large for such a dark thriller. Fans created edits, theories, breakdown videos, parody trailers, and detailed character studies across social media platforms. Some viewers even compared the movie to classic psychological crime dramas like Heat and The Departed because of its emotional intensity and layered character relationships. While the film has its own identity, those comparisons helped audiences understand its tone. Another reason critics respected the movie is because it avoids cheap manipulation. Emotional moments feel earned rather than forced. The film takes time building relationships before destroying them emotionally. That patience gives the climax greater impact. Audiences genuinely care about what happens because the characters feel human. The dialogue also became memorable because it sounds realistic instead of overly polished. Characters interrupt each other, hesitate, change subjects, and avoid difficult truths. These messy conversations feel authentic. Some scenes almost resemble stage plays because of how heavily they rely on actor chemistry and dialogue tension instead of visual spectacle. The movie proves that strong writing and performance can still captivate audiences completely. The release timing also benefited the film greatly. Many viewers were growing tired of formulaic franchise storytelling and wanted something more grounded and emotionally serious. This movie arrived at exactly the right moment. Older audiences especially appreciated the mature storytelling style. Younger viewers discovered a slower, more psychological form of thriller filmmaking that many had rarely experienced before. The film's success may also influence future crime dramas. Studios often chase trends, and this movie proved there is still strong audience demand for intelligent adult thrillers driven by atmosphere and character tension. Awards conversations quickly began after release as well. Critics frequently mention the performances, screenplay, cinematography, and editing as potential contenders during award season discussions. Even viewers who disliked the slower pacing usually admitted the craftsmanship was impressive. The movie feels carefully constructed from beginning to end. Another interesting aspect of audience response involved emotional exhaustion. Many people described feeling mentally drained after watching the film because of how relentlessly tense it becomes. Yet strangely, that exhaustion often made viewers admire it even more. The story leaves emotional bruises rather than simple entertainment satisfaction. It lingers in the mind afterward, forcing viewers to think about trust, fear, greed, and human weakness. As months passed, the movie's reputation only continued growing. More audiences discovered it through streaming and word of mouth recommendations. Discussions remained active because the story rewards analysis and repeat viewing. In many ways, the film represents a return to mature thriller storytelling where atmosphere matters more than spectacle and emotional realism matters more than flashy action. The movie reminds audiences that fear does not always come from monsters or explosions. Sometimes fear comes from ordinary people trapped in impossible situations. slowly destroying each other because they no longer know who to trust. The Rip is a 2026 American action thriller film that arrived on Netflix on January 16, 2026, representing one of the most eagerly anticipated cinematic collaborations of the decade. Written and directed by Joe Carnahan, who also co-developed the story with Michael McGrath, the film reunites two of Hollywood's most celebrated and beloved partners, Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, for the first time in a major action vehicle produced through their own production company, Artist Equity. With a budget of approximately $100 million, dollars, a runtime of 113 minutes, and a supporting cast that reads like a who's who of contemporary film and television talent, The Rip announced itself as a significant cultural event long before it ever appeared on screens. The film stars Matt Damon and Ben Affleck as police officer embedded within the Miami-Dade Police Department Narcotics Unit, and its story is grounded at least partially in the remarkable true events surrounding a real life raid conducted by Miami Dade County Police Captain Chris Casiano and his squad. The result is a tense, kinetic, compulsively watchable piece of genre filmmaking that managed to generate substantial critical discussion not only for what it put on screen but for the innovative business arrangements that surrounded its release. To understand the Rip fully, one must appreciate the remarkable creative and personal history shared by Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, two men who grew up together in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and who became perhaps the most famous collaborative duo in the history of modern Hollywood. Their friendship stretches back to childhood, and their artistic partnership produced one of the most celebrated screenplays in recent memory when they wrote Good Will Hunting together in the mid 1990s, a film that earned them both Academy Awards for Best Original Screenplay and launched their careers into the stratosphere simultaneously. In the decades that followed, they pursued largely separate paths as actors, with Damon establishing himself as a reliable leading man across franchises, including the Bond series and in prestige dramas, while Affleck oscillated between blockbuster performances, a stint as Batman in the DC Extended Universe, and celebrated work behind the camera as a director. Yet their friendship never wavered, and their professional collaboration simmered quietly beneath the surface of their individual careers, occasionally flaring into joint productions and public appearances. The formation of Artist Equity, their production company, represented a formalization of that long standing creative partnership. Artist Equity was conceived as a production entity with a distinct philosophy, one that placed the artists themselves, the actors, the crew, the craftspeople at the center of the financial model. Rather than simply delivering films to studios or streaming services in exchange for flat fees, Artist Equity sought to structure deals in a way that rewarded the people who actually made the films if those films performed well. This philosophy would become central to the story of the Rip's production and distribution, and it distinguished the film's journey to audiences in ways that extended well beyond the content on screen. The project was first announced publicly in June 2024 when news broke that Damon and Affleck were set to star in a crime action thriller that was already generating significant excitement in Hollywood. Joe Carnahan, the filmmaker attached to write and direct, brought an immediately recognizable sensibility to the material. Carnahan had built a career on viscerally intense crime films and action thrillers, having directed projects like Narc, a gritty and brutal police procedural that earned widespread critical acclaim, as well as The Grey, a survival thriller starring Liam Neeson that became a cultural touchstone of masculine resilience and philosophical reckoning with mortality. Carnahan's work was characterized by a raw, kinetic energy, a willingness to immerse audiences in environments of physical and moral danger, and a particular fascination with men operating under extreme pressure, often in professional contexts where the lines between law and lawlessness were deliberately blurred. His attachment to The Rip, a film about police officers whose loyalty to one another is tested by the discovery of an enormous sum of criminal money, was therefore a natural fit. Shortly after the project was announced and began circulating as a package in search of distribution, Netflix moved decisively to acquire the rights. The streaming giant had been increasingly investing in high profile, star driven action films as a strategy to attract and retain subscribers, and a film starring two of the world's most recognizable actors, directed by a filmmaker with Carnahan's pedigree, was an obvious acquisition target. But the deal that was ultimately negotiated between Artist Equity and Netflix was anything but ordinary. In what was described at the time as a first of its kind arrangement, Netflix agreed to pay a performance based bonus to the approximately 1,200 people who had worked on the production of the film, provided the movie met certain performance benchmarks within its first 90 days of availability on the platform. This was a dramatic departure from Netflix's customary approach, which involved paying a single upfront fee to talent and maintaining strict confidentiality around viewership data. The new arrangement essentially meant that the grips, the gaffers, the set designers, the costume departments, the editors, the sound mixers, and all the other below the line workers who contributed their craft to the RIP would have a direct financial stake in the film's success. This deal was widely reported and extensively discussed in the entertainment press, with many observers noting that it represented a meaningful, if incremental, shift in the power dynamics between streaming platforms and the creative labor that sustains them. For years, the transition from theatrical exhibition to streaming had eroded the residual payment structures that actors, writers, directors, and crew members had relied upon as a secondary revenue stream. The 2023 strikes by the Screen Actors Guild and the Writers Guild of America had been driven in large part by concerns about the streaming economy and its effects on the livelihoods of working professionals in the film and television industries. Against that backdrop, the arrangement negotiated for the RIP carried a symbolic weight that exceeded its practical financial significance. Ben Affleck and Matt Damon had used their considerable leverage to extract a concession from Netflix that, while limited in scope to a single film, pointed toward a model in which streaming success could be more broadly shared with the people responsible for creating it. Matt Damon spoke about the Netflix deal with characteristic candor in various promotional interviews, offering a revealing window into the nature of the streaming giant's expectations for content and the ways in which those expectations shape the creative process. He described how Netflix, upon signing on to distribute the film, had certain script stipulations that reflected the particular viewing habits of its user base. The standard architecture of an action film, Damon explained, typically involves three major set pieces: one in the first act, one in the second, and one in the third, with the third being the most expensive and spectacular, a climactic flourish designed to reward audiences who have committed to the full runtime. Netflix's feedback, as Damon described it, pushed back against this conventional structure. The platform wanted a significant action sequence within the first 5 minutes of the film, reasoning that the streaming environment required an immediate hook to prevent viewers from abandoning the film before it had established itself. Additionally, Damon noted that Netflix suggested the film's plot be reiterated multiple times throughout its dialogue, on the theory that audiences watching on streaming platforms are frequently distracted by their phones and may miss narrative information during initial viewings. These stipulations offer a fascinating and somewhat melancholy glimpse into the conditions under which contemporary mainstream cinema is being made. The creative instincts of filmmakers are increasingly being calibrated to accommodate the fractured attention of audiences who are watching on laptops, tablets, and phones while simultaneously engaged with other activities. Whether the RIP ultimately succeeded in threading the needle between genuine cinematic craft and algorithmically informed structural engineering is a question that critics and audiences engaged with in interesting ways following its release, but the fact that such considerations were openly discussed by its lead actor and producer reflects an unusual degree of transparency about the sausage making of modern streaming content. The story at the heart of the RIP is one that draws powerfully on archetypes of American crime cinema while grounding itself in the specific geography and criminal ecology of Miami. The film begins with the murder of Captain Jackie Velez, a high-ranking officer within the Miami-Dade Police Department's Tactical Narcotics Team, known within the department as TNT. Her death casts an immediate shadow over her unit as suspicion begins to fall on her own officers amid swirling rumors that a crew of crooked cops has been systematically robbing drug houses throughout the region. The central figure of the story is Lieutenant Dane Dumars, played by Damon, who is Velez's second in command and who receives a mysterious tip about an address in Hialeah, a city in Miami-Dade County that has long been associated with Cuban American communities and in the film's world with the operational infrastructure of drug cartels. Dumas assembles his team: Detective Sergeant J.D. Byrne, played by Ben Affleck, Detective Mike Rowe, played by Stephen Yeun, Detective Numa Baptiste, played by Teyana Taylor, and Detective Lolo Salazar, played by Catalina Sandino Moreno, and leads them to the Hialeah address on what is ostensibly a routine search for illicit money. The first significant act of deliberate misdirection occurs even before the team enters the house. Dumars, who clearly knows more about the situation than he is letting on, tells each member of the team a different figure when they ask how much money they are looking for. This seemingly small detail, a different number for each officer, becomes the linchpin of the film's entire dramatic architecture, the thread that, when eventually pulled, unravels the conspiracy at the story's center. At the house, the team encounters Desi Molina, played by Sasha Coley. Desi is the granddaughter of the home's recently deceased owner, a young woman who is drawn into the film's escalating crisis reluctantly and who occupies a fascinating liminal position throughout the narrative. Not quite a civilian, not quite a criminal, someone who has inherited a dangerous secret along with a family property. Desi initially resists the officer's entry into the home but eventually relents and allows the team inside. What they discover inside transforms the stakes of the entire film dramatically. Hidden in the attic of this ordinary Hialeah house is $20 million in drug cartel cash, an extraordinary sum that represents both an enormous legal seizure and an almost irresistible temptation. Dumas' response to the discovery of the money is immediately suspicious to his colleagues, though the reasons behind his actions are not what they initially appear to be. Rather than following standard protocol which would require notifying his superiors in the command hierarchy, he makes the extraordinary decision to keep the discovery secret from higher command. He also confiscates the team's phones, cutting off their ability to communicate with the outside world, a move that transforms their presence at the house from a routine police operation into something far more ambiguous and potentially dangerous. The tension that develops in the scenes that follow is precisely the tension of people who are professionals in a world governed by rules and procedures, suddenly finding themselves in a situation where those rules seem to have been suspended, where the person in authority is behaving in ways that suggest either corrupt intent or a plan that has not been shared. An uneasy encounter with two local Hialeah officers adds to the atmosphere of menace and uncertainty. The team arms itself as they begin the standard procedure of counting the money on site. Even as they do so, Mike Rowe is quietly using a burner phone, a prepaid mobile device, to make communications that he is clearly concealing from his colleagues. Desi complicates the situation further by explaining that she had been given instructions by parties who had stored the money in her grandmother's house to offer a share of the cash to anyone who discovered it. This revelation transforms the dynamic of the scene significantly, as it raises the possibility that the team has not stumbled upon the money by accident but has been deliberately led to it, a hypothesis that gains further weight when Dumas learns that Desi was once a police informant. As the story develops, threatening phone calls begin arriving at the house, demanding that the team leave and abandon the money. Byrne, growing increasingly suspicious of Dumas' behavior and the discrepancy between his version of events and the original tip, confronts his lieutenant directly and demands to see the tip that brought them to the house. Dumas refuses. Fearing that the lieutenant is positioning himself to steal the money, Byrne takes the drastic step of contacting DEA agent Matty Nix, played with considerable menace by Kyle Chandler, a performer known for embodying men of authority who may or may not deserve the trust placed in them. Nix suggests to Byrne that Dumas may have been involved in Captain Velez's murder, a suggestion that amplifies Byrne's paranoia and distrust to a breaking point. Byrne, investigating alone, enters a neighboring property and discovers it is being used as a cartel lookout. The isolated neighborhood, it becomes clear, is not simply neglected. It is under active cartel surveillance and control. A representative of the cartel, summoned by a call from the lookout Byrne apprehends, attempts to communicate through this intermediary. The cartel is willing to abandon the $20 million, cutting their losses in exchange for being left alone. But the representative also delivers a dark warning. The murder of Captain Veles may have been carried out not by external enemies but by a member of her own team. The suspicion that was already poisoning the unit from within is now being fed by intelligence from criminal sources, and it becomes nearly impossible to distinguish truth from manipulation in the escalating paranoia. The physical danger materializes suddenly when the power at the house is cut and the building comes under heavy gunfire. In the chaos that follows, Salazar is wounded. Dumas and Rowe drive off the attackers, but the encounter leaves the team badly shaken and deeply divided in their loyalties. Rowe loses his burner phone in the scuffle, a loss that will have significant narrative consequences. The arrival of Nix and his team, ostensibly as reinforcements, seems at first to offer relief, but the film is carefully building toward a revelation that reframes everything the audience has witnessed. Leaving Baptiste and Salazar behind at the house with Daisy, the other detectives accompany Nix and the seized money in the back of an armored vehicle, a scene that bristles with claustrophobic tension. The resolution of the film's central mystery is both satisfying as a piece of genre plotting and emotionally resonant in ways that connect to the personal backstory of the characters. Dumas finally reveals the truth about what he has been doing throughout the film. Captain Veles, before she was killed, had sent him the tip about the Hialeah house. Her plan had been to use the house as a trap, as bait for the crew of crooked cops that had been robbing drug operations. By leading everyone, including his own team, to believe that he intended to steal the money himself, Dumas was forcing the corrupt members of the crew into action, compelling them to reveal themselves. The different amounts he told each team member were not a sign of confusion or deception for personal gain. They were a diagnostic tool, a way of identifying which member of the team would eventually leak a specific number to their co-conspirators, thereby unmasking themselves as part of the criminal network. When the mysterious phone calls to the house turn out to include the specific amount that Dumas told Rowe, the lieutenant is able to deduce with certainty that Rowe is connected to the heist crew, and the crew, it turns out, extends beyond Rowe. Nix, the DEA agent who appeared to be Burns' ally and who cast suspicion on Dumas, is himself part of the conspiracy. The Hialeah officers who appeared during the team's initial time at the house are also implicated. It was Nix and his men who made the threatening phone calls, who orchestrated the attack on the house, while Rowe, working from inside the team, set the house on fire. The plan was to create a crisis chaotic enough to allow them to steal the money under cover of confusion. Jumars had anticipated all of this, and he had shared his suspicions with Byrne at some point during the film's timeline. Byrne, in the scuffle during which Rowe lost his burner phone, had deliberately stolen it, securing the evidence of Rowe's communications with Nix. The film's climax plays out with the explosive energy that Carnahan's direction is well suited to deliver. Nix opens fire and his driver is killed in the confrontation that follows. Both Rowe and Dumas are wounded. Nix's admission that he and Rowe were responsible for the ambush of Captain Veles, that they murdered a fellow officer to protect their criminal enterprise, lands with devastating moral weight. But the machinery of justice is already in motion. Byrne has contacted his brother Dell, an FBI agent played by Scott Adkins, and the authorities are converging on the situation from outside. The crew find itself cornered. Rowe is chased down through the streets and arrested by Dumas in a scene that carries both physical and emotional charge, as Damon embodies the particular exhaustion of a man who has been carrying a terrible secret while maintaining the appearance of normalcy throughout an incredibly dangerous operation. Nix leads Byrne on a car chase that ends with the DEA agent shot dead. The film's final grace note is both clever and surprisingly touching. It is revealed that the $20 million that Nix and his crew believed they were transporting in those money bags was not in fact the drug cartel's cash. Desi's grandmother, the eccentric owner of the Hialeah house, had apparently been an obsessive hoarder of phone books, and the team had quietly swapped the real money for stacks of phone books while the conspirators were distracted. The real cash is turned in by the team, a final affirmation of their integrity after everything they have been through. Desi, for her cooperation and the unexpected assistance her grandmother's hoarding habit provided, receives 20% of the total seizure, a substantial sum that represents a new beginning for a young woman who had been inadvertently caught up in a dangerous criminal web. In the film's closing image, Dumas and Burns stand together on a beach, watching the sun rise over the ocean. It is a moment of quiet commemoration. They are watching the sunrise in memory of Captain Velez, the woman whose death set the entire chain of events in motion and whose plan, maintained and executed by her trusted lieutenant, ultimately brought her killers to justice. The cast assembled for The Rip is remarkable both for its star power and for the range of talents it brings together. Matt Damon's performance as Lieutenant Dane Doomers requires him to sustain an extended double game throughout the film's runtime, behaving in ways that are genuinely suspicious while concealing the benign reality beneath that suspicious behavior. It is, in some ways, a technically demanding role. Damon must make Dumas convincing as both a potential villain and as an ultimately heroic figure, and the performance must work on both levels simultaneously for the film's eventual revelation to land with emotional force. Damon has always been a performer of considerable intelligence and controlled intensity, capable of conveying complex interior states through subtle physical and vocal restraint, and those qualities serve the character of Dumas well. The character is also given a deeply personal dimension that connects to real events in the life of the man who inspired him. Dumars is grieving the death of his 10-year-old son, Jake, who has died from cancer before the events of the film begin. This backstory, which shapes Dumars' emotional state throughout the narrative and gives his dedication to honoring Captain Velez's memory an additional layer of meaning, was directly inspired by the real-life story of Miami-Dade County Police Captain Chris Casiano, the officer on whose actual experiences the Rip is based. Casiano's son, Jake William Casiano, died from leukemia in 2021, and the filmmakers honored that loss by incorporating it into the fictional narrative. The presence of this real grief at the center of an action thriller is one of the elements that elevates The Rip above the purely formulaic, lending the film an emotional texture that pure genre mechanics cannot provide. Ben Affleck's Detective Sergeant J.D. Byrne is the film's moral compass, or at least the character through whom the audience most directly experiences the film's ethical dilemmas. Byrne is the one who most actively suspects Doomers of wrongdoing, the one who takes the initiative to call in outside help, and the one whose loyalty is most tested by the ambiguity of the situation. Affleck, who has been through a period of significant personal and professional turbulence in the years leading up to this film, brings an earned quality of weathered resilience to the role. His comfort working opposite Damon is immediately evident. There is a shorthand between the two performers that communicates a long shared history without needing to explain or demonstrate it. Critics and audiences alike noted that the chemistry between Damon and Affleck was one of the film's most compelling elements, the natural ease of two people who have known each other for decades, translating directly into the texture of two characters who have worked side by side through years of dangerous police work. Stephen Yeun's Mike Rowe is one of the film's most interesting casting choices. Yeun, who became an international star through his years on The Walking Dead and subsequently earned an Academy Award nomination for his extraordinary work in Minari, brings a quality of intelligent likability to Rowe that makes the cat's betrayal genuinely surprising. Yoon has always been able to project trustworthiness, a quality that his career has occasionally used to subvert expectations, and in The Rip, that quality is weaponized by the narrative. Rowe is embedded within the team as one of the film's primary antagonists, but for much of the runtime he appears as nothing more or less than a competent, loyal detective, and the performance makes that impression convincing. When the truth of his complicity is revealed, the audience's sense of having been deceived mirrors the experience of Dumas and Byrne within the story. Tiana Taylor, the multi-talented artist and performer who had been building an impressive acting career alongside her music and business ventures, plays Detective Numa Baptiste with a grounded physical presence that adds energy to the ensemble scenes. Her background in performance, she is a trained dancer and choreographer as well as a musician, gives her a particular command of space and movement that serves action filmmaking well. Sasha Kale, who had previously appeared as Supergirl in the DC Extended Universe's The Flash, takes on a very different kind of role as Desi Molina, a character who is neither superheroic nor villainous but simply human, caught in circumstances she did not choose and navigating them with a complicated mixture of fear, cunning, and quiet dignity. Khole's performance grounds the film's more spectacular elements in a relatable human reality. Kyle Chandler, whose career has been built on playing men of authority and who is perhaps best known for his Emmy winning work on Friday Night Lights and his powerful performances in films like Manchester by the Sea and First Man, brings exactly the right quality of plausible menace to DEA agent Matty Nix. Chandler has a face and a bearing that projects reliability and competence, qualities that make his character's villainy more disturbing when it is revealed. The filmmakers were clearly aware of the actor's natural screen persona and used it strategically. Nix's apparent trustworthiness is a function not just of the script but of Chandler's established image as an actor associated with integrity and authority. His physical presence in the film's climactic sequences delivers on the promise of that earlier menace. Catalina Sandino Moreno, the Colombian actress who earned an Academy Award nomination for her debut film Maria Full of Grace, brings depth and specificity to Detective Lolo Salazar. Her presence in the film is a reminder that Miami's multicultural reality, its large Cuban, Colombian, and Latin American communities, is not merely a backdrop but a living context that shapes everything from the geography of crime and to the composition of the police departments that fight it. Scott Adkins, a British actor known primarily for martial arts action films and who appeared in the supporting role of FBI agent Delburn, JD's brother, represents a different kind of acting tradition, one rooted in physicality and precision of movement rather than in the nuanced character psychology that dominates the film's other performances. The production of The Rip involved a compressed but intensive shooting schedule. Principal photography began on October 3, 2024 in Los Angeles and was initially expected to wrap on December 11, 2024. Additional scenes were filmed in New Jersey during November 2024, adding an East Coast dimension to the production's geography. The choice of Los Angeles as the primary filming location rather than Miami itself reflects both the practical realities of film production, the infrastructure of the Los Angeles industry, the availability of locations, the concentration of crew talent, and the long tradition of Hollywood films set in one city but shot in another. Juan Miguel Aspiros served as the cinematographer on the project, bringing a visual sensibility to the film that would need to evoke the heat, humidity, and particular quality of light associated with South Florida while working in the very different environment of Southern California and New Jersey. The score for The Rip was composed by Clinton Shorter, a musician who had previously worked extensively in television and film, contributing music to projects across a range of genres. For an action thriller set in Miami, the musical palette would draw on a tradition that extends from the synthesizer-heavy atmosphere of the original Miami Vice television series through to contemporary crime cinema's use of electronic textures to evoke heat and danger. The editing of the film was handled by Kevin Hale, whose work on the cut would be crucial in managing the film's considerable structural complexity. The revelation that recontextualizes everything that has gone before requires an editing approach that is both fair and misleading simultaneously, allowing the film to be rewatched with new eyes once the truth has been disclosed. The film's release on Netflix on January 16, 2026 was preceded by a publicity campaign that leaned heavily on the reunion of Damon and Affleck, a story that the entertainment media found irresistible. The two actors appeared together in various promotional contexts, including a notable appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast, episode 2440, which aired on January 17, 2026, just one day after the film's release. The Rogan appearance was notable for its length and candor. The podcast format, with its extended conversational structure, allowed Damon and Affleck to discuss the film in more depth than a conventional press junket interview would permit, and Damon's comments about Netflix's structural requirements for the film circulated widely in the entertainment press. The appearance demonstrated the extent to which the promotional strategies for major streaming releases had evolved to include podcasts and long-form digital media alongside traditional apparatus of press tours and television appearances. Critical reception to the rip was generally favorable, though not uniformly enthusiastic. On Rotten Tomatoes, the major review aggregation website, 79% of 146 critics' reviews were positive, a figure that placed the film comfortably in the fresh category and suggested broad critical approval, even if there was no consensus that the film represented exceptional or extraordinary cinema. The site's critical consensus, a sentence length summary of critical opinion compiled by the platform's editorial staff, praised the film for leveraging the natural chemistry between Damon and Affleck to create texture around a friendship tested by greed, and described the film as tearing into its thriller setup with compulsive, watchable confidence. On Metacritic, a review aggregator that uses a weighted average scoring system, The Rip received a score of 63 out of 100 based on 32 critics' reviews, a figure that the platform classified as indicating generally favorable reviews. The Washington Post's Travis Andrews, writing a moderately positive assessment, awarded the film 2.5 out of 4 stars. Andrews described The Rip as capable of pleasing audiences who enjoy crime genre films, but noted that viewers less invested in the conventions of the genre might find themselves frustrated by the film's reliance on familiar cliches and its action sequences, which Andrews felt ran somewhat long. This is a recurring note in the critical response to the film. An acknowledgement of craft and entertainment value combined with a sense that the film does not fully transcend its genre origins or offer anything genuinely new to the form. For audiences who love action thrillers, police procedurals, and the particular pleasures of watching two charismatic movie stars navigate a tightly constructed conspiracy plot, the film delivers exactly what it promises. For viewers seeking cinema that pushes beyond genre conventions, The Rip may have felt like a comfortable rather than transformative experience. This balance of critical opinion, largely positive but with reservations about its generic familiarity, is not unusual for well executed studio style genre entertainment, and it arguably undersells what the film achieves within its chosen mode. Joe Carnahan is not a filmmaker who has ever been primarily interested in deconstruction or subversion. His strengths lie in the execution of genre at a high level of craft, in the creation of atmosphere and physical tension, in the management of ensemble casts in confined or pressurized spaces, and in the calibration of moral ambiguity within frameworks that eventually arrive at something like resolution. The Rip plays to all of those strengths. The confined space of the Hialeah house, where much of the film's middle section takes place, allows Carnahan to create the kind of pressure cooker environment in which his direction thrives. The walls feel like they are closing in, the loyalties shift and curdle, and the physical world, the heat, the dust, the money, the weapons, feels constantly, tangibly present. The choice of Miami and Hialeah as the film's setting is itself significant and deserves more attention than it sometimes receives in critical discussions of the film. Miami has a particular place in the American cultural imagination, shaped by decades of association with drug trafficking, with the cocaine trade of the 1970s and 1980s, with the particular violence that attended the rise of the Colombian cartels and their networks of distribution along the eastern seaboard and through the Gulf Coast. Hialeah, as a specifically Cuban American city within Miami-Dade County, carries its own distinct cultural weight. It is one of the most densely Cuban American cities in the United States, a community that has its own complicated relationship with questions of authority, legitimacy, and the state, shaped by the experience of exile, by the trauma of the Cuban Revolution, and by the particular pressures of immigrant communities navigating American legal and economic structures. To set a film about corrupt cops and cartel money in this specific environment is to invoke all of that history, even if the film does not always explicitly engage with it. The real story that inspired The Rip is itself a remarkable piece of American criminal history. In 2016, Miami-Dade County Police Captain Chris Cassiano led his narcotics squad in a raid on a residence in Miami Lakes, a suburban community within Miami-Dade County. The raid uncovered $20 million in cash concealed within the property, a sum that represented cartel money and that represented one of the largest seizures of its kind in the region's history. The discovery was not only a significant law enforcement success but a test of the integrity of the officers involved. The presence of that much untraceable cash in a room full of people with no immediate oversight creates a temptation that most people would never face, and that speaks to something fundamental about human nature and institutional trust. Casiano and his team passed that test, following proper procedure and turning over the full seizure, and it is their demonstrated integrity that the film honors, even as it weaves a fictional conspiracy around the basic facts of the discovery. The filmmakers were careful to note that the corrupt cop narrative at the center of the rip is entirely fictional. There was nothing in Casiano's actual operation to suggest any wrongdoing by any member of his team, and the complex web of betrayals and double agents that drives the film's plot has no basis in the real events. But the emotional core of the real story, the discovery of an enormous sum of money, the test of professional integrity, the bonds of a tight knit police unit, provided the foundation upon which the film's dramatic architecture was built. The personal dimension that connects the character of Dumas to Cassiano's life, the loss of a child to leukemia, adds another layer of meaning to this connection, suggesting that the filmmakers were not simply mining a true crime story for plot elements, but were genuinely moved by the human reality behind the events and sought to honor that reality even within a fictional framework. The relationship between the rip and the real story of Chris Casiano raises broader questions about the genre of the inspired by true events crime film, a category that has been enormously productive in American cinema, generating classics from All the President's Men to Zodiac to The Departed to Spotlight. The genre trades on a particular kind of authority that fiction alone cannot claim. The knowledge that these things actually happened, that the institutions depicted are real, that the moral stakes are not merely hypothetical but have already been played out in the real world with real consequences for real people. At the same time, the inspired by formulation allows filmmakers to take liberties that pure documentary or journalistic work cannot, to invent characters, to compress timelines, to dramatize events for which no witnesses remain, and to impose narrative shape on the messy contingency of actual events. The RIP navigates this territory competently, using the real case as an anchor while departing freely from it wherever the demands of the dramatic narrative require. One of the most interesting aspects of the RIP in the context of contemporary Hollywood cinema is what it represents about the evolution of the prestige action film as a category. For most of the history of cinema, the action genre occupied a somewhat lower rung on the aesthetic hierarchy than dramas, prestige pictures, or art films. Action films could be commercially dominant, even culturally significant, but they were rarely positioned as the vehicles through which serious actors and serious filmmakers would express their primary creative ambitions. The 1980s and 1990s saw the rise of the action star as a distinct Hollywood archetype. Stallone, Schwarzenegger, Willis, Van Damme, performers whose appeal was primarily physical and whose films were understood as entertainments rather than as art. The turn of the millennium began to complicate this picture, with increasingly thoughtful and technically ambitious action films attracting stars and directors who might previously have avoided the genre. The Bourne series, in which Damon himself was a key figure, represented one pole of this development. Action films that incorporated espionage thriller conventions with unusually rigorous psychological realism about the consequences of violence and institutional corruption. The Rip can be seen as a continuation and extension of this tradition. It is a film that takes its genre seriously, that believes in the capacity of action and thriller mechanics to carry genuine emotional and moral weight, and that brings genuinely talented, committed artists to the project of making those mechanics work at the highest level. The casting of Damon and Affleck is not incidental but central to the film's meaning. These are actors who carry with them decades of cultural meaning, who represent a particular kind of American male friendship and creative collaboration, and who have visibly aged and experienced and changed over the years that separate the present moment from their emergence as stars. When they appear together in the Rip, they bring all of that accumulated history with them, and the film is in some sense about the persistence of friendship and loyalty under extreme pressure, a theme that resonates more richly for the knowledge of who these actors are outside their roles. The question of what streaming has done to the action film as an art form and as a cultural experience is one that The Rip implicitly raises without fully addressing. Netflix's structural suggestions to Carnahan and the production, the front loaded action sequence, the repeated exposition reflect a set of assumptions about audience behavior that are themselves a consequence of the streaming model. When films are watched in theaters, the contract between film and audience is relatively simple. You go to a specific place at a specific time, you sit in the dark, you surrender your attention to the screen for the duration of the film. The distractions are minimized, the social contract of the viewing experience imposes a kind of discipline on attention. When films are watched on streaming platforms, that contract is entirely different. The viewer is at home, potentially surrounded by other screens and other demands on their attention, able to pause, rewind, fast forward, or simply stop watching. The film must compete for attention rather than simply commanding it, and the structural and rhythmic choices that the filmmakers made in response to Netflix's feedback are a direct expression of this competitive environment. Whether these adaptations ultimately serve or undermine the film is a question on which reasonable observers might disagree. A front loaded action sequence can be an excellent piece of filmmaking in its own right. There is nothing inherently artistically compromised about beginning a film with a spectacular set piece, and some of the greatest action films in history do exactly that. The issue is whether the choice is made for genuine narrative and cinematic reasons or as an algorithmically motivated accommodation to viewing habits that the platform would rather encourage than challenge. The transparency of Matt Damon's comments on this subject is both refreshing and somewhat troubling. Refreshing because it acknowledges a reality that too often goes undiscussed in the promotional apparatus of major releases. Troubling because it suggests a creative process in which the tail of distribution considerations is wagging the dog of artistic decision making in quite explicit ways. For artists' equity, the film represented an important test of their business model and their capacity to operate at the scale required to compete with the major studios. $100 million production is a significant undertaking for any company, and the pressure to deliver something commercially viable was real and substantial. The innovative deal with Netflix, the performance bonuses for crew members added another dimension of complexity to the business considerations since the terms of the bonus structure would need to be negotiated, administered, and ultimately fulfilled, all of which required a level of transparency about the platform's data that Netflix had historically been reluctant to provide. The very fact that Netflix agreed to the arrangement was itself a news story, and the coverage it generated contributed to the promotional profile of the film in ways that a conventional marketing campaign might not have achieved. The film's costume design, production design, and overall visual aesthetic drew on the specific visual codes of Miami set crime drama that had been established by decades of cultural production, from the pastel suits and cigarette board aesthetics of Miami Vice through to the more grounded contemporary visuals of films like Pain and Gain or television series like Bloodline. The Hialeah setting gave the production design team a particular opportunity to create an environment that felt both recognizable and specific. The modest residential streets, the old Florida bungalow architecture, the particular quality of light filtering through subtropical vegetation, all of which are distinct from the gleaming luxury of Miami Beach or the Art Deco glamour of Ocean Drive. This visual grounding in a particular neighborhood, a particular kind of space that most action films would overlook in favor of more spectacular settings, is one of the elements that give the Rip a quality of specificity that elevates it above purely generic entertainment. The supporting performances in The Rip deserve acknowledgement for the way in which they fill out the world of the film and give texture to what might otherwise be a fairly spare procedural narrative. Nestor Carbonell, a Cuban American actor perhaps best known to television audiences for his recurring role in Lost, plays Major Tom Vallejo with the kind of institutional authority that the character requires. Lina Esco, who had built a following through her years on the police procedural SW8, plays Captain Jackie Velez, the murdered officer whose death sets the entire story in motion. The role is in some ways thankless. Velez dies before the main action begins, and her presence in the film is largely retrospective, mediated through the grief and loyalty of the characters who survive her. But Esco brings to the character enough life and specificity that her absence feels genuinely felt rather than merely mechanically significant. Jose Pablo Cantillo appears as DEA agent Dayo Reyes, adding to the film's impressive ensemble. Cliff Chamberlain plays Officer Younger, one of the Hialeah officers whose appearance during the team's search of the house adds to the early layers of suspicion and confusion. Alex Hernandez plays Officer Warwick, and Daisuke Tsuji appears as FBI agent Logan Cassiano, a character whose surname is clearly a tribute to the real law enforcement officer whose story inspired the film, a quiet acknowledgement of the debt the film owes to its real-world source material. The film's treatment of the Miami-Dade Police Department as an institution is worth examining carefully. Police procedural fiction has always had a complicated relationship with the institutions it depicts, sometimes idealizing them, sometimes critiquing them, often doing both simultaneously in ways that reflect the ambivalence with which American popular culture has always regarded law enforcement. The Rip is not a film primarily interested in systematic institutional critique. It is a film about individual integrity tested by extreme circumstances. The corrupt officers in the film, Roe, Nix, the Hialeah officers, are presented as aberrations, bad actors within systems that are fundamentally capable of self-correction, as demonstrated by the eventual arrest and exposure of the conspirators. The heroes, Dumars and Byrne, are fundamentally good people who are trying to honor the memory of a murdered colleague and to protect the integrity of their profession. This is a relatively conventional moral framework for the crime thriller genre, one that places individual virtue at the center of the story while leaving structural and institutional questions largely unasked. It is a framework that many critics and scholars of crime fiction would find insufficiently complex, and it is fair to note that The Rip does not attempt to be the kind of film like The Wire in the television space, or like Serpico or Prince of the City in the cinematic tradition, that uses the police narrative as a vehicle for broader social analysis. But within its chosen framework, the film executes with genuine skill and the moral questions it does engage with. How much individual loyalty can survive under pressure? What forms of deception are compatible with genuine integrity? What it means to honor dead by completing their work are handled with more nuance than the genre typically demands. The film's title, The Rip, operates on multiple levels. Most immediately, it refers to the act of the heist itself, the ripping off of the cartel's cash, the tearing away of the money from its hiding place. But it also evokes the rip current, an oceanographic phenomenon in which a narrow, powerful channel of water moves strongly away from shore, dragging anything caught in its pull away from safety and into open water. The rip current is particularly associated with Florida's coastal waters, where its danger to swimmers is a regular concern. As a metaphor for the film situation, officers caught in a powerful current of suspicion, deception, and danger that threatens to drag them away from their moorings of professional identity and ethical commitment. The title works with considerable elegance. The final image of Dumas and Byrne on the beach, watching the sunrise over water, places the ocean context explicitly in the frame and gives the title its fullest resonance. These are men who have survived the rip, who have been pulled toward corruption and destruction, and have found their way back to the shore. The film's treatment of grief, particularly Dumas' grief for his son Jake, is one of its most quietly effective elements. The loss of a child is one of the most devastating experiences a human being can endure, and the decision to give the film's central character this particular wound gives him a dimension of personal catastrophe that exists entirely outside the professional crisis of the plot. Dumas is not simply a cop dealing with a difficult case. He is a man who has recently lost something irreplaceable, who is operating in the world with an invisible wound, who is carrying out an extraordinarily dangerous operation while also carrying the ordinary crushing weight of parental grief. Damon plays this dimension of the character with characteristic restraint, allowing the grief to exist as a presence that inflects his behavior without overwhelming it, suggesting the way in which people who have experienced enormous loss learn to compartmentalize, not in denial of their grief, but as a survival mechanism that allows them to continue functioning in the world. The connection to the real Jake William Cassiano, who died from leukemia in 2021, gives this element of the film a weight that extends beyond fiction. The film is, among other things, an act of memorial, a tribute to a child who died too young, carried into the story through the character of his father and given a kind of immortality within the narrative. This is one of the ways in which the inspired by true events framework operates at its most meaningful. Not just as a claim of journalistic accuracy, but as a gesture of human acknowledgement, a way of saying that real lives and real losses matter enough to be remembered and honored even within the conventions of genre entertainment. The discussion of the RIP in the context of the streaming economy inevitably raises questions about the future of cinema as a cultural form. The film was a Netflix release, meaning that it was available to hundreds of millions of subscribers worldwide on the day of its release, with no theatrical window preceding its streaming debut. This mode of distribution has significant consequences for how films are experienced, discussed, and remembered. Theatrical releases create shared cultural moments. The film is seen by audiences who are in the same room, who react together, who talk about it on the way out, who encounter other people's responses in real time. Streaming releases create a more distributed, atomized experience. Everyone can watch at any time, which means that the cultural conversation around a streaming release tends to be more diffuse, spread across a longer period, and more variable in terms of the circumstances under which different viewers encounter the film. The RIP performed well by the metrics that Netflix would use to assess such things, though the exact figures remained, as is customary for the platform, closely held. The performance bonus arrangement meant that there was more pressure than usual for Netflix to provide meaningful data about the film's performance, since the bonus would be triggered by specific benchmarks within the first 90 days of release. Whether and how that bonus was ultimately paid out, and what it meant for the approximately 1,200 workers who had labored to bring the film to screen, would become part of the film's story even after its release, adding a continuing narrative thread to the already complex circumstances of its production and distribution. In the broader context of Joe Carnahan's directorial career, The RIP represents something of a return to the police procedural territory that marked his early breakthrough. Narc, his second feature, released in 2002, was a viscerally intense examination of an undercover narcotics operation that garnered enormous critical acclaim and announced Carnahan as a filmmaker of significant talent. The film's visual style, handheld, grainy, immersive, established an aesthetic approach that Carnahan has continued to refine and develop over the subsequent decades. The RIP, with its higher budget, its star-driven ensemble, and its streaming platform context, represents a very different kind of production challenge than Narc, but the thematic territory is closely related. Corrupt police, drug money, tests of professional and personal loyalty, the moral ambiguity of law enforcement in environments where crime and the state interpenetrate in complex ways. Between Narc and the RIP, Carnahan's career included the ambitious ensemble crime film Smokin' Aces, which divided critics but demonstrated his capacity to manage large casts and complex plotting, the aforementioned The Grey, which represented his most personal and philosophically ambitious work, and various other projects including action films, television work, and screenwriting credits. The trajectory of his career reflects the unpredictable nature of the contemporary film industry. A highly talented filmmaker who has worked at different scales and in different modes, whose best work has always been marked by a particular intensity of focus and a willingness to place characters in situations of extreme physical and moral danger, and to observe what happens when ordinary human beings encounter circumstances that exceed their capacity to manage. The RIP also sits within a specific tradition of the Miami crime film that has been one of the most productive subgenres of American cinema and television. Miami Vice, both the television series created by Michael Mann in the 1980s and the feature film he directed in 2006, established a visual and tonal language for depicting Miami's criminal underworld that has been enormously influential on subsequent work in the genre. The heat, the water, the particular quality of South Florida light, the intersection of Latin American criminal networks with American law enforcement, the luxury and the violence coexisting within blocks of each other. All of these elements have been recombined in countless subsequent productions, from Scarface to Bad Boys to Bloodline to Ozark's Miami adjacent storylines. The Rip enters this tradition as a confident practitioner, drawing on the visual and narrative grammar of the genre while finding its own specific texture through the Hialeah setting and the particular personalities of its cast. The film's approach to violence is worth considering in some detail. Carnahan has always been a filmmaker who takes violence seriously, not in the sense of avoiding it, but in the sense of treating it as something that has real consequences, that leaves marks, that changes people who both enact and experience it. The Rip is an action film, which means it involves a significant amount of violence, but Carnahan's direction ensures that the violence feels weighty rather than weightless, that it registers as dangerous and costly rather than as spectacular entertainment detached from consequence. When Salazar is wounded in the attack on the house, the injury is not quickly forgotten or minimized. It becomes part of the ongoing calculus of the team's situation, a reminder of the very real physical danger they are in and of the human cost of the conspiracy they are caught up in. The film's construction of suspense relies heavily on the technique of withholding information from the audience. We do not know as the story develops whether Dumars is actually crooked or whether his suspicious behavior has a benign explanation. This technique of narrative misdirection is as old as the thriller genre itself, and the Rip employs it skillfully. The film is constructed in a way that allows a second viewing to be a genuinely different experience from the first. Once the truth about Dumas' plan is known, the entire first two-thirds of the film read differently, and the performance choices that Damon makes become visible in a new light. This kind of replayability is particularly valuable in the streaming context, where algorithms favor content that generates multiple views from the same user, and it represents an example of artistic and commercial interests converging rather than competing. The script, credited to Joe Carnahan with the story developed in collaboration with Michael McGrail, deploys the conventions of the police thriller with considerable efficiency. The exposition is handled through action and character rather than through static dialogue scenes. The plot mechanics are clear without being simplistic, and the character dynamics, particularly the evolving relationship between Dumas and Byrne, are given enough development to feel genuinely earned. The dialogue has the particular quality that good genre writing requires. It sounds natural and character specific, while simultaneously doing the work of advancing plot and establishing information. There are moments where the Netflix mandated plot repetitions are perhaps more noticeable than they would be in a film made without such constraints, but for the most part, the script manages to convey necessary exposition in ways that feel organic rather than mechanical. The film's release in January 2026 placed it within a particular moment in the American cultural conversation about policing, about corruption, and about the ethics of institutions. The years preceding the film's release had seen enormous public discussion about police practices, about racial disparities in law enforcement, about the conditions under which corruption flourishes and is allowed to persist. The Rip does not directly engage with the most contentious contemporary debates about policing. It is not that kind of film, but it is not entirely insulated from those debates either. The presence of a diverse cast, including actors of Black, Korean, Colombian, and other backgrounds within the police unit, reflects an awareness that the demographic composition of law enforcement matters and that stories about police can be told from perspectives other than the default of white male protagonism that dominated the genre for most of its history. Looking at the film in the round, The Rip emerges as a genuinely accomplished piece of mainstream genre entertainment that delivers on its promises in most respects while also operating as a cultural artifact with significance beyond its immediate entertainment value. It documents a moment in Hollywood history, the reunion of Damon and Affleck under the banner of their own production company, the evolution of the Netflix deal towards something more equitable for below the line workers, the ongoing negotiation between commercial demands and creative integrity in this streaming age. It honors a real law enforcement officer and his family, including a son whose brief life and painful death are memorialized in the character of Dumas' son Jake. It provides Joe Carnahan with a platform and resources commensurate with his talent, and it demonstrates that he can work at scale without losing the intensity and focus that characterize his best work. And it gives audiences 113 minutes of tightly constructed, well performed, atmospherically convincing thriller entertainment that, while not revolutionary, is executed with a craft and commitment that earns genuine appreciation. The critical consensus, broadly favorable without being rapturous, captures something real about the film's position in the landscape of contemporary cinema. The Rip is not going to be remembered as one of the great films of its era, but neither is it disposable or forgettable. It sits in the admirable middle category of genuinely good genre films made by people who care about their craft and who bring real intelligence and skill to the project of satisfying genre expectations while also finding within those expectations room for genuine human feeling. The chemistry between Damon and Affleck, the specificity of the Hialeah setting, the emotional reality of Dumas's grief, the elegant construction of the film's central misdirection. These are not small achievements. They are the elements that separate a well made film from a merely competent one for Netflix. The film represented a significant acquisition and a demonstration that its model of buying star driven genre entertainment could produce films that generated real cultural conversation and critical approval. The innovative deal structure around the performance bonuses for crew members, whatever its ultimate practical consequences, position the platform as a participant in rather than an obstacle to the conversation about how the creative economy of streaming could be made more equitable. Whether that positioning translates into meaningful systemic change, whether the model pioneered by Artist Equity and Netflix for the RIP becomes a template for future productions, remains to be seen, but the film's release established a precedent and generated expectation that will be difficult to entirely ignore. For Damon and Affleck, the RIP represents a successful deployment of the capital, financial, creative, and reputational that they had accumulated over their long careers and formalized through artist equity. The film proved that they could work together effectively not just as actors but as producers, that their instincts about talent and material were sound, and that their ability to attract and retain the kind of talent required for a major streaming action thriller remained intact. More than that, it provided them with a platform to make good on the values that Artist Equity had publicly espoused from its founding. The commitment to sharing the economic benefits of successful filmmaking with the full community of artists and workers who make films possible. The story of the RIP is in the end a story about loyalty. On screen, in the narrative of Dumas and Byrne and the team they lead, loyalty is the value that is tested, questioned, and ultimately affirmed. Off screen, in the production history and business arrangements of the film, loyalty to a different set of values. The value of creative community, of shared risk and shared reward, of honoring the labor that makes art possible, is what the innovative deal structure was designed to express. These two stories, the fictional and the real, reflect each other in ways that give the film a resonance beyond its immediate entertainment merits. The Rip is a film about what it means to trust the people you work alongside when everything is on the line, and about the kind of people who are worthy of that trust. It is a question that the film asks of its characters and that the people who made it were simultaneously asking of themselves and of the industry in which they work. In assessing the Rip's place in the filmographies of its principal creators and in the landscape of contemporary American cinema, it is worth ending where the film itself ends. On that beach in Miami, two friends watching the sunrise, honoring the dead by remaining alive and committed to something worth honoring. It is a quiet moment at the end of a loud and kinetic film, a pause for reflection after 90 minutes of escalating physical and moral danger. The gesture is simple but not cheap. It acknowledges that the professional world in which these characters live, a world of raids and deceptions and corruptions and betrayals, is also a world in which people form genuine bonds, sustain genuine loyalties, and honor genuine losses. Cinema at its best tells us that those things are true at once, that the world can be dangerous and treacherous and also simultaneously and without contradiction, a place in which friendship and integrity and memory are worth something. The Rip at its best moments makes that case with conviction and with craft.